So this passage is a little cryptic for some folks. The idea that this generation is like children dancing in the marketplace. They're saying, we cry and you don't cry with us. We dance and you don't dance with us. And what it seems to be from their explanation afterwards is Jesus is critiquing people with power, especially religious leaders of his time with power, who had a calling from John the Baptist to repent, to cry, to wail, and they refused that calling. He's like, there's something wrong with John the Baptist. And then they had a call from Jesus to be joyful and to dance and to love and to sit at the common table together. They said, oh no, he's just a glutton. We don't want to be a part of him. And so they always critique the calling from those with less power and refuse to cross that chasm between the less powerful and the more powerful and join together in any way and be a part of what's happening. And it's the separation that we still experience today in our culture of the very powerful and the less powerful. And it's the separation that kills us. So keep that in mind as we talk today about joy. The series of Living Resistance is coming to an end today and next Sunday. Very brief sermon next Sunday because we have a lot of other things going on. But we've talked about all the ways that we practice resistance against the empire in our everyday lives, not just the big political actions. We've talked about having a rule of life, standards that we live according to that are countercultural, and that can be individual standards and community standards. We talked about the food that we eat, the food we choose, how we get it, how we prepare it, who we eat it with, all as an act of resistance. We talked about rest as resistance to the tyranny of productivity from the empire. We talked about creativity as we create in order to share, not just to sell or to make a profit, but to share what we make with one another. We talked about how work can be a resistance to empire if we focus on our coworkers and the common struggles that we have with our coworkers. We talked about family and the way that family our biological families can, for some people, be a conduit for imperial values, or patriarchy and misogyny and heteronormativity, and all these things can come through family to us, and the importance of then choosing our family when we need to in order to resist the empire. For 2 weeks, we talked about generosity and giving, sharing what we have instead of hoarding. And today we're talking about joy. Practicing joy, practicing beauty, practicing playfulness in the midst of all the terrible things that we see happening in the world, and that's an act of resistance. And on the surface, this is pretty easy. What are the things that give you joy? Cooking, music, dancing, writing, gardening, hiking, storytelling, drumming, all the different ways that what follow your bliss. What are the things that fill your cup and do those things? But I want to dig deeper than that little hallmark version of joy. One question that might come up for many of us is that what are the implications of being joyful in a world where there's so much suffering? When we know that immigrants in the US are being unjustly detained and deported and families separated, when we know that in Gaza and the West Bank, Palestinians are being brutalized, Sudanese are experiencing slaughter, Ukraine, growing homelessness, when in our country, when the politicians will use hunger as a tool for their political agenda, how in all that suffering, what does it mean for us to be joyful? Is that okay? And on the one hand, yes, it is, because empire wants us to despair. Empire wants us to give up and be depressed, and we resist that by practicing joy. But how is that done exactly? And how is it done in a way that we can do it with an integrity that matches our values? I want to give you 2 examples of doing this. And the first one is familiar and flawed and fine. It's familiar, it's flawed, it's fine. The second one I think is will be new to you, inspiring and challenging. Both of these examples of practicing joy in the midst of empire involve children. And I think that if you think about it, we instinctivly know that if a child is being in a traumatic situation, if they're afraid, if they're being, if something's happening inside the child that's troubling them deeply, that you want to swoop in and provide some joy. You want to let them know that they're safe, provide comfort, lift up their spirits, because we know that sustained trauma for any child, for anybody, can have profound consequences down the road, and so we want to provide that joy. We know that instinctively. And both of these examples are examples of adults trying to do that for children. The first one, familiar, flawed, and fine, is Sister Maria in The Sound of Music, when there's the big thunderstorm, and all the Von Trapp family children run into her room and jump on her bed, and she sings about her favorite things. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens and bright coppered kettles and warm brown paper packages. And that's fine. What she's doing there is distracting them from the scary thing that's happening with things that give joy. It's kind of a form of escape. And we all need escape. We all need to think when something bad is happening, we can't just always dwell on the bad. We need to think of the good things, the things that bring us joy and make us happy. And yeah, so you take a hot bath when you're feeling stressed, and Calgon, take me away. And you do all the things that make you joyful, like I mentioned, gardening and cooking and singing and knitting. And sometimes we need that. We just need to fill our cups so that we have something to share with others. And that's great. But favorite things, I think, is flawed as a method of resistance because it is just about distraction. It's don't think about the thunder. Don't think about the war. Don't think about the fascists. Don't think about where you're getting your next meal. Think about brown paper packages and cream-colored ponies. It's resisting the call to be sad and despairing, but it's not really changing anything. The second example, I'll give you some context from an article in Al Jazeera, which I really recommend if you're looking for a different perspective on your news. This is August 30th, 2025, and it's about a man named Ahmed Abu Amsha. The nonstop buzz of Israeli drones overhead long predates the constant burst of gunfire and explosions since Israel started the war on this besieged enclave. Quote, "In Gaza, there is no escape from the reality of war," said Al Jazeera's Ibrahim al-Khalili, reporting from Gaza City, where exploding buildings and chaos reign and desperate people attempt to escape gunfire at food distribution sites. Added to these horrors is the ever-present sound of the Israeli drones. Khalili said as he paused to listen to the sound of the drones overhead. Khalili said that drones had hovered over Gaza for years before October 7th. Many Palestinians living in Gaza City find the sound of these drones unbearable, he said, explaining that, quote, "It's not just surveillance, it's psychological warfare. It's a noise meant to unnerve and to break people down." Even before the current war, a report published by Save the Children in 2022 said that 4 out of 5 children in the Gaza Strip suffer from depression, sadness, and fear caused by this punishing Israeli blockade on the territory. However, music teacher Ahmed Abu Amash has found a creative way to help those feeling distressed by the threatening buzzing that's always coming from above by turning this sound meant to torment into something positive, a song. And so we're going to watch a video of this guy, and I want you to pay attention right at the beginning to that drone sound that you're going to hear in the background.
Hello everyone, how are you? I miss you a lot, really. Today there's a lot of drones. I'm going to sing a song today. The drone. شيل يا جمالي شيل يا حوطك بالله دم الشهيد معطر بالهيل ليل يا ليلو ويل ويل عالظالمين ويل ويل من الله لا أسهر على نجوم الليل أنا ناديله شيل شيل يا جمالي شيل يا حوطك بالله دم الشهيد معطر بالهيل ليل يا ليلو ويل ويل عالظالمين ويل ويل من الله لا أسهر على نجوم الليل أنا ناديله شيل شيل يا زماني شيل يا حوطك بالله دم الشهيد معطر بالليل يا ليل ويل ويل عالظالمين ويل ويل من الله لا أسهر على نجوم الليل أنا ناديله شيل شيل يا زماني شيل يا حوطك بالله دم الشهيد معطر بالليل يا ليل ويل ويل عالظالمين ويل ويل من الله لا أسهر على نجوم الليل أنا ناديله.
He doesn't just try to distract the children. He integrates the sound that is causing their trauma and their fear, and he transforms it into beauty and into joy. He doesn't say, don't think about it, but if this is our reality, what are we going to do to change this reality? How are we going to use our power to create beauty and to create joy out of this horror? Amshah heard the children cry and cried with them. He heard the children wanting to dance, and he danced with them. I think the metaphor I would use for this idea is a loom. And a loom like one of those big wooden framed looms that has two frames that interact like this and has the vertical threads, and it goes back and forth. We're back. And am I back here? Okay, good. Thank you. That was weird. So think about the loom, the two frames, the vertical threads, and then somebody takes what's called the shuttle, and that's the colorful thread. And they run it this way, and then and the threads go back and forth, and they run it this way, and then the vertical threads go back, and that's how they're weaving. They're weaving this beautiful tapestry on a loom. I think we could look at the vertical threads as the suffering in life, and the hard things that happen in life that happen over and over and over again, back and forth. And the beauty that we create is that colorful thread that goes back and forth, back and forth. And we can't change the vertical threads of the suffering, but we can choose the color and the beauty of the pattern that we make within that suffering. I think that's what Amshah does so well. But I want us to be cautious as we're thinking about this and take this to another level, in that we who are comfortable, we who have wealth and abundant possession and privilege, we have to be careful about sentimentalizing the joy of the oppressed. Or sometimes I think even Americans will fetishize the joy of those in the global South. And, the church goes on a mission trip and spends some time with some folks in a impoverished village, and they're like, oh, but they're just so joyful. And I think that's true, and we sometimes use that to assuage our guilt of the systems that create their suffering. And we have to always hold that joy that they have in tension with the conditions which create it, to know that the joy that they practice there is an act of survival. That they are responding to conditions of which we are all complicit in our wealth and our power, in their survival choice to bring joy into the weaving of their life. I mean, those drones that they always hear in Gaza were probably produced in the United States. And the technology for them was probably had something to do with Stanford or the tech companies that are all over our Bay Area. We are all intertwined with the suffering in this world, and so we have to be very careful when we look at those who are oppressed and their joy and be like, yes, we all just need to be like that. We can't do that when we have wealth and power and privilege. We can't just be joyful. And there's two things that get in our way, and they're related. One is our wealth and our possessions, and the other is our isolation or the chasm between us and those who are less powerful. Those two things are so intimately related that they feed off each other in a cycle, that as we have wealth, we become dependent on our wealth and our possessions, and then we become fearful that somebody's going to take them away because the possessions are what provide us the comfort, and so we isolate ourselves in our fear. And then we get depressed because we're isolated, and then we get more wealth and possessions to fill that hole of our depression. Wealth leads us to separate from the very people who have the joy that we so want. Think about the Grinch. Did you ever think that the Grinch was an anti-imperial, anti-colonial political parable? Did you ever read the Grinch politically? The Grinch is the wealthy and the powerful of the world up there on his mountain, looking down over those in the global south, the over-extracted global south, with all of its wealth, all of its natural resources. And the Grinch is like, if I take those natural resources, I'll be happy and they'll stop being happy. And so he goes and he steals all the resources from the global south and takes them up his mountain. And then he wants to look and he wants to see what's happening down there, and he sees that the Who's still have joy, not because they are just happy all the time, but because they need to have joy in order to survive. And then he takes 2 steps because his heart changes. And we have 2 choices as people with wealth and power and possessions. Either our hearts change or the Who's down in Whoville march up the mountain and stab us to death, okay? So those are the choices. Let's go for the first one, all right? Let's change our hearts. And that means 2 steps: loosening our grip on our wealth, loosening our grip on our possessions, giving back. In the Grinch parable, it's not just giving, it's giving back what was stolen. We can't hold on to our wealth and experience the joy, and then joining them at their table. Going down in the mountain in a servant attitude, carving the roast beast, being a servant, and joining them at their table. If we go back to the loom metaphor, I want to change the meaning of the vertical threads. Because for us, those of us who have privilege and wealth and power, I don't think the vertical threads are suffering. I think the vertical threads are the people that we choose to have in our lives, the relationships we choose to have. And we are called by Jesus to have relationships with all the kinds of beautiful people in the world, whether they're different races or cultures or languages or socioeconomic statuses, to incorporate these relationships into our everyday lives, which is not easy. It's not easy to change those vertical threads. It's fast to run back and forth with the horizontal, but the vertical threads, you have to untie carefully each one and decide what one you're going to tie into place in your life. And so the idea of incorporating new people who are different from us, who stretch us and cause us to be challenged, is an intentional choice, that we find people that we want in our life, we enter into communities that we are not comfortable in, and we tie those one by one into our life, into the vertical thread of our life, and then we can start weaving our own lives back and forth into theirs. So as we practice joy as resistance, yes, follow your bliss. We need joy. We need to be happy. Everybody, no matter who you are, no matter how much wealth you have, needs joy, and we need to resist the idea that we are powerless and that the empire wants us to despair. But follow your bliss as a Hallmark card. If we want the gospel, if we want the teachings of Jesus, we have to go to the next level and seek to loosen our grip on our wealth and our possessions, to give back what we have, to find people of all backgrounds and to tie them into the loom of our life, and weave joy into our lives as we do so, and let them weave joy into ours. Amen.